Good morning and welcome to Inspiring Conversations with me, Ekta Bajaj. I am the co-founder of a beautiful creative company that we call O.N.E. Started in 2015. We have grown and expanded into beautiful areas. We started by turning stories into picture books for children, and very happy to now expand into areas for adults as well, where we are making coffee table books for families actually to just preserve the stories that they have so that they can just pass on as legends to the next generation, and also into a course writing. So if then anyone has a story, we can offer them means to just express themselves. And talking about expression, today I have a very special guest with me who will be speaking to me about expression and storytelling. And she's someone who comes with a lot of experience in publishing industry. So I have Vini Bhati with me from Shrishti Publishers. And thank you so much, Vini, for kindly accepting this invitation to join me on this conversations. And the aim of this whole conversation today is that if you are thinking of writing the story, if you're thinking that there is something inside you that's telling you that you must write, then I hope by the end of this conversation we can give you some insights into this industry that we have, the beautiful publishing industry that we have, the challenges you might face, and the changing trends today, of it. And the whole trend of publishing industries, it's such a dynamic industry that every day something new is happening. And I'm hoping to speak to Vini Bhati, who is the editor of Shrishti Publishers, to about these changing trends. So I'll let Vini introduce herself. Thank you so much, Vini, and welcome to Inspiring Conversations.
Hi, Ekta, and hi, our lovely viewers. Thank you so much for having me. That was a very, very lovely introduction. So I think it's amazing to always meet people who are so passionate about storytelling and who are actually using stories to change lives. I love what you do. Author in Me is a beautiful organization, and I personally love children fiction. I love working on their books, and I genuinely feel that it is through stories, it is through knowledge that you can actually change their lives. You can actually mold them into leaders of tomorrow. So cheers to you. I think we're doing something so beautiful. Thank you
Thank you,
so much
Vini.
for having me. And you're absolutely right. Publishing industry is seemingly supposed to be, so ideally the perception is that it is a very, very static, slow moving industry. That is how I was told in the beginning, but it's
Mm.
absolutely the opposite. I think any industry which has storytelling in it is always very dynamic. It's evolving. It's very much in sync with its society, and it is a very, very vibrant industry to be in. So I
Yes.
think you've actually said very, very correctly. So just to briefly introduce about what I do. So I am a part of Shrishti Publishers, which publishes bestsellers. So bestsellers means we have to actually tap into the pulse of the readers. So we basically cater to the mass media. What are the themes that are working with the Indian youth? What are the stories that they would like to know about? So that is what we do. We've worked with a diverse set of authors. So Preeti Shenoy is one of our bestsellers. Then we
Yes.
have Ajay Pandey. Then in with children literature, I recently we did a book with Swapna Datta, ma'am. She is one of the very, very leading children's book author. So I think as as a principle, we believe in giving platform to budding authors who have
Mm.
something meaningful to convey. So
Mm.
that is what we believe in principle. And as an editor, I assist them from end to end. So I will help them with their manuscripts. It will be in a very intensive editing stage, then proofreading. Then I also help them with the cover designs. Then
Wow.
once the book is out, we actually sit together with the author and we plan their social media campaign very, very meticulously. So it's a pretty exciting journey. It has a lot of things going on. And I think because Shrishti is very, very, say, leading in sales and distributions also. So whatever they publish, they actually say do the selling part of it as well. So they are connected to various booksellers like Home Booksellers, W.H. Smith. So I think with a very, very active sales division, we also get to know what's working with the masses. So I think the sales figures are the
Yes.
absolute, say, determiner of what are the themes that are commercially working. So I think that is what actually gives us also the inspiration. That is what gives us also the insight into what's new and what's contemporary. So I think publishing is in itself is a very, say, diverse field. With cover designers we work with a lot of visual artists, so that is a different area altogether, because there you are doing storytelling through images.
Yes.
So that's a very, very different art altogether. So I think it encompasses the verbal, the visual, and of course the sensory also, because it's just not what you read, but how it makes you feel. So I think
Mm.
that's pretty much about it. And I love what I do, and it is because of what I believe in that I get to meet passionate artists like Ekta who are doing such good work in London.
Oh,
So
you
I
are
think I'm just
embarrassing
glad
me.
that our paths crossed.
And it's all sounds beautiful and very exciting, especially for someone who is actually looking to publish a book.
Yes.
But I will tell you very frankly how, you know, about 10 years back, or there was a time when I was looking for a publisher to publish a set of stories that I had written, and I found it was so difficult to get into the right to meet the right person to get into that industry. And I think that was somewhere the trigger to start authoring me because I was like, why must my talent be restricted by somebody's availability? If they don't have time to read what I've written, is that going to restrict what I have to share? And that's why I said no. Maybe children should be told very early on that they have a story and it's beautiful and it needs to come out.
Yes.
So it I know it's very difficult for authors to mark their debut in the industry. How and I think you mentioned to me that you particularly like to work with debut authors.
Yes.
So why is that decision taken, and how do you encourage debut authors? Because you are probably one of the few ones, and I don't know why I didn't meet you earlier. Probably I had to start authoring, and that's why I had to go through that journey and
Yeah.
to understand the publishing industry. But how easy do you make it for debut authors? My
Yeah.
question is that.
So I think it's a great question, because a lot of people know about creative writing, but then publishing in itself is a very opaque industry. So
Hmm.
even I didn't know a lot of it before I actually entered the industry. So, like in India, we have different kinds of publishing houses. We have traditional publishers, which will have Penguin, Harper, say Macmillan. So actually, Penguin is pretty much very hybrid, because it has the traditional publishing elements also, and then it has self publishing also. So but then the place where I am in, that's traditional publishers. So what we do is we try to make it as democratic as possible. So
Hmm.
there are three things that we do which actually encourages, say, debut authors to write. So our process is very, very simple, Ekta. It's like, uh, if you want to come through literary agent, then it's absolutely your choice. But what
Okay.
we try to encourage is that we have an editorial email ID, and which is very active. It's like,
Okay.
if you have a story, if you have written something, you have to submit a proposal, and
Hmm.
all the proposals which are sent to us, we actually review it. It's like we are a team of three
Great
people
to
whose
know
one,
that.
really, it's like, so that is what I told you. One part of my job is actually evaluation of manuscripts. I have to actually go through a range of, say, proposals. I have to read them, then I have to prepare a meticulous feedback. So if we are
Mm,
rejecting it, it's not by our whims and fancies. We have very solid grounds of not being able to publish, because as
okay.
it is, with traditional publishers, our schedule is pretty rigid, because it's
Mm,
us who's actually putting in the resources. So we have to, and all of our, say, profits come through sales. So we have to be very, very strategic in that regard. So we will anyway give more preference to commercial fiction, because that is what will give us more sales. So I think
mm,
for debut authors, we make the process as simple as possible. it's a very, very open, very democratic process. You have a good story, you write a proposal, you send it to us, it will come directly to the editor. So there is
Ah.
no intermediary. There is not. There is um, sometimes people have literary agents. So
Hmm.
there is a scenario where a proposal will come through us through a literary agent, which is fine. So if the author wants to approach us through a literary agent, it's absolutely fine. But then we don't make it mandatory for them.
That's
So
nice.
yeah,
Hmm.
so it's a very, very clear channel of communication with a lot of transparency. So the first thing we do is we make it very, very easy. The second thing we do is, so if you look at our social media, this is something that I personally monitor. We try to put in resources which actually help authors to get published. So if you
Really?
notice, there are a lot of, say, resources to learn writing, but not many people know how to get published. So
Hmm.
that is the area, this knowledge, say, dissemination, the knowledge creation around this field, because publishing in itself is a very, very closed circuit in India, very closed, very, very very opaque also, because not many people know what's happening inside. Only the editors would know. So we try to build the gap that's there. So that is what I also personally believe in, that if you have a good story, you should know how to market it.
Yes.
Because I think in an age which is so driven by social media, there are hundreds and thousands of stories. How do you make your story more marketable? So I think it
Hmm.
is in that regard also we really hope and strive to give a lot of knowledge. So I think in there is on Tuesday, so Tuesday on our social media, there is this tips and hacks of how to write and get published. So it's a
Wow.
Tuesday series. So there we began with how to get published, how to write a proposal, how to write a synopsis, how to write a blurb. So sometimes I think this is a very, very interesting thing. So not many people know that the way the cover letter that you write in your proposal is also equally important.
Yes.
So the cover letter, the email that you will be writing to your editor and your publisher will actually will actually give them an impression of how you are as a writer and as an artist. So sometimes I think this
Hmm.
is just a very internal office joke that we get very, very funny, say, subject lines. Or sometimes there will not even be a cover letter. They'll just be like, PFA, please find attached. So I think little intricacies that matter, because as
Hmm.
an editor also we get like hundred and thousands of proposals. How do you make yours stand out? Maybe you write a more personalized cover letter. Maybe you just don't, CC all the publishers in India. So this happens a lot. It's like,
Really? Have
so
you received letters
yes,
like that?
yes, we have such funny letters, because I think these are the things that nobody actually teaches you. You learn as
Absolutely.
you move along. So this just we have very, very funny subject lines. Sometimes people will just write the entire log line in their subject line, so it'll be like a really long subject line to read. Sometimes we'll get a proposal which will be, so people generally don't know the difference between VCC and CC, and so what they'll do is they'll put two Srishti and they'll put two Harper and Penguin. So we'll see all the publishers that are there in India in the
Wow.
email thread. So I think these little things which sometimes go very unnoticed,
Hmm.
we actually make it a point to tell them. I mean, it's just something that will actually help you go a long way. It will help you distinguish yourself from other writers, from other storytellers, and it will just get you noticed. So this
Absolutely.
is one area that we particularly focus on. Also, interestingly, what you would it will be very surprising for you that most of the writers come from tier two states. So
What's that?
tier two states, so very small states. So
Ah,
recently, I
really?
worked. Yeah, I think writing is supposedly a very, very popular passion in tier two states. So in
Probably they
small,
have so many more stories to share.
exactly. So I think sometimes we collaborate with people who are, say, living in Patna and in very, very
Wow.
small towns. So I think that is also something that we have to keep in mind. So for people who are living in, say, metro cities, who are working in corporates, they know the tricks of the trades. They know
Hmm.
how to present themselves. But they would not know that. I think we cater to their needs so that when they come into the publishing industry, they don't feel that kind of lack, because they happen to be most of our authors. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just out of chance that they happen to be the people who come to us. So
really.
that is also an
That's
insight that I gathered.
very
So
interesting. That's very interesting. And that just reflects the fact that the stories probably people are carrying in their heart.
yes,
How much desperation, or how eager they are to share it with the world.
yeah,
Isn't it?
definitely. I think interestingly, so I'll just tell you the story because we are discussing about passion. So my
Sure.
first author whom I worked with, so he was based in a very, very small town. So and he was working on this manuscript for 10 years. I mean, it got
Wow.
rejected for like three
Oh.
times. And I think recently also, his name is Piyush Gupta. He recently got published with us. And the first thing that he told us was that my dream came true. So I think that was one emotion that really stayed with me, that how he was so perseverant, he was so
Mm,
persistent in actually chasing his dream. So I think that is also something that I have seen very, very closely, how writing is just not the pursuit of, say, the elite class, as we would
no.
like to say, but then
Mm,
it's as much a literary pursuit of the middle class, and sometimes even the lower middle class people also. So
mm,
that is what we that is what I have noticed. The third thing that we particularly do to make their journey more interesting is to actually interact with them. So once the manuscript is accepted, we actually assist them in every step. So our processes are very simple. So we work on MS Doc, which is
mm,
like very simple, easy to use. And even with our feedback, we are very, very meticulous. So sometimes our authors, they are not very comfortable in speaking in English. So we
mm,
have to speak to them in Hindi. So I think the language
mm,
barrier also sometimes um, impact your confidence, because
mm.
the publishing industry is overwhelmingly, like the commercial ones is in English.
Yes.
So it is supposed to be dominated by English speakers. So the perception is that if you're a good writer, then you should have a strong command over English. Like,
Mm,
that is what the general perception is. But what we believe in is that if you have a good story, then the English bit we can help. So that is
wow.
something that I have seen very, very closely happening here. That the authors who get published with us, they may not be very good in their language. They may not be able to express their ideas that, say, that effectively as somebody who has a stronger command over their English. So that is where our role comes.
And they
So
have
that is,
written these stories in English.
yes. So
But
they write it.
that's wonderful that you are giving them this chance to express
Yes.
their stories. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. So I think if somebody happens to have that literary flair, we are just happy because our work gets
Wow.
reduced. But then most of the time we know for sure that their literary flair is not going to be that strong. But then we genuinely believe that that should not be a deterrent, because that is
Mm,
what editors are for. That is what we are here for. We are here to refine your story. We are here to polish it, and everything is done in tracks, so the author is always like on the loop. So we really sit with them. There are parts where they are not very, very confident about, they want to retain, so we basically tell them if we are not able to retain. So what I'm trying to convey is that it's a very, very collaborative process,
wow.
and we ensure that there is no hierarchy that's there. So it's not that whatever the editors say is the word, and you cannot just go against it. Having
Mm,
said that, we love to work with authors who are very collaborative, who believe in us, and know for the fact that whatever we are saying has a merit to it. So I think it just comes down to three things: knowledge dissemination through social media, making the processes very easy, and seamless collaboration. I think these
beautiful.
are the three things that we particularly do to really empower debut authors.
But that is so beautiful, and I'm so much impressed. And there is a new level of respect for your organization that I've got in my heart now, because
Thank you.
lately, and this is something I had started observing lately, is that not saying this to any particular company or organization, but I'm seeing that there is this surge in celebrities coming as authors and trying to get their books out. And I'm not sure if they are good writers, but because they
Yes.
have a certain presence in the media and they have a certain following, they are given more preference. And I was getting afraid, and I was just a little scared of the fact that, is this going to stop genuine storytellers, genuine people who have a beautiful story to share? Is this focus now going to shift from there to again having these Bollywood stars or celebrities coming and sharing the story? And they, of course, they can share it, but would that take the space away from actually literary book writers or readers, and actually who is interested in book reading? And I'm so glad that you are giving that platform to not just people who are not very confident in speaking English, but they are very confident in sharing a story. So beautiful, beautiful. You've just retained my faith back in the industry.
Thank you so much, Ekta. I think you very rightly said that the prerogative, the right to tell stories actually belong to everyone.
Yes, yes.
And while there is a surge of, say, celebrities and actors and cricketers, I mean, they are very much free to tell the world what their experiences are. Having said that, stories are different. They're unique. They
Yes.
cannot be, say, deciphered in very qualitative terms. I mean, every story is important, every story is different. And that is why, I mean, even in India there are different kinds of publishers. So there are international publishers, but then like we're Indian publishers, so we
Hmm.
believe in actually giving Indian authors the platform to actually speak their stories. So I think the fact that there are a lot of publishing houses, and every publishing house has an expertise in a particular
Hmm.
kind of, say, writing and publishing. I think that gives anybody enough space to actually reach out. So I think
Hmm.
that is what even we tell authors also, that you have to decide which is the publishing house that is correct for you. So
Absolutely.
there are publishing houses like Sage that does academic writing. So if I have a bestseller story, I wouldn't go to them. I'll
Yes.
possibly go to Shrishti or Rupa or Westland. So
Yes.
I think a lot of parameters come into play, and you have to, say, decide and reach out to the publishing house that you think will assist you in the best possible way, which will
Hmm.
give you the kind of audience that you're looking for. So as an author also, I am actually looking at a lot of parameters, at a lot of factors. And given the fact that India is a very, very vast and diverse
Yes.
country, I think diversity, I think plenty of experiences, opportunities, and plenty of publishing houses also. So
Hmm.
that is why I think even self publishing houses are actually good, because
Hmm.
traditional publishers, while they are very good in their regard, they're very restricted also. So it's like, if I'll have hundreds of manuscripts, I will only be able to give 10 slots, so I will only be able to shortlist 10.
So, how
So
many books do you publish in one year, if
So
in
around
an
30 to
average?
40, 30 to
Okay.
40 we do in one financial year. So
Hmm.
it becomes tough for us also, because we
Yes.
just have these 40 slots. So what about the other, say, stories which are equally good? So I think that is where even self-publishers are actually great,
Hmm.
because they also give them the kind of platform, and their dynamics are very different. But then it has just opened the space of publishing a lot. So it's just
Hmm.
not 3 to 5 publishers now. A lot of publishing houses are opening up,
Yes.
and some of them are self, some of them are traditional, some of them are hybrid.
Hybrid.
So they
Right.
have features of both traditional and self publishing also. So I think as a space, it's becoming all the more interesting, because the dynamics for both the authors and the publishers are changing. So I
Yes.
think, and that's happening even more. this COVID and this post COVID. I hope I can call this a post COVID
I
era.
hope so. Yes.
But I think that is something that I've seen happening in this era all the more, because I
Hmm.
think with all the difficulties that people went through, there have been more stories. I think human beings in
Yeah,
general, we thrive in sharing
they
our,
people
say,
were more
voices.
they had more time to reflect, and which is where my next part of discussion will go to is the
Yes,
changing trends in the industry. I mean,
yes,
we saw so many digital books come out. Everyone
yes,
who had a story found a platform on Amazon Kindle and
yes,
shared their story. So now, with these new ways of expressing oneself, which is through audiobooks, through podcast, through YouTube, people would just share a certain part of the story, and then I've seen some of the channels where that story just carries on the next week. It's like a weekly thing. It's very engaging, and it's beautiful in a way as well. So because people are finding so many creative ways of actually sharing their story, how much do you think it's going to impact the publishing industry and this traditional book publishing and the whole charm of it? Do you think it's getting affected in any way, or do you think that's just adding on to it?
yes. I think that's a great question, because while the pandemic impacted different industries, it did have its effect on publishing also, honestly,
Yes,
because what happened during the pandemic was that the bookstores were shut.
yes,
So what happened was that whatever, from the perspective of sales, all the paperback that were going out, so that came to a standstill. So I think
mm,
that is where it actually affected the most, because especially for traditional publishers, because they gain most of their revenues through book sales. And I
yes,
think last year things were actually all the more difficult, because the lockdown, it actually lasted for way longer. So
yes,
I think from that regard, yes, it did have its impact. But then, having said that, what we saw interestingly is that the urge to tell their story became it intensified, as you rightly said. It took different forms of expressions, but then it helped us all the more, because it gave us diversity. It gave
yeah,
us a lot of good content, and it gave us all the more stories to share. So within Shrishti, we have this imprint called Quickies. So Quickies is something that I look into. That's ebooks. So
okay,
Quickies is it's short reads, ebooks. So what we do within Quickies is that we don't publish full length novels. We will do short stories. Now, all these
okay,
short stories should be, they should have an overarching theme. So, what
mm,
we noticed is that people were actually interested in reading ebooks, and that is where our focus shifted. That because people are reading more online now, so
mm,
quickies is something that we saw people say gaining a lot of interest in. So I think as a publisher also, we also have different tools at our disposal. So if the paperbacks are not working, we know that there's
yeah,
ebook, there's say audiobook.
audiobooks,
So I think that is what makes the game more interesting. Yes, there are, say, stumbling blocks, but I feel that storytelling is very intrinsic to human nature. So no matter how difficult the circumstances become, it can never lose its charm entirely. It can change its form, but then it will never be able to lose its charm entirely. Something that so Neil Gaiman is one of the authors that I really like, and he has some beautiful perceptions and thoughts about storytelling, and how it gives meaning to one's life. How it is just not uh, a, a a pursuit which is useless. I mean, people may not see it to be of any use, like on a very literal level, but then it actually gives us the motivation to go through with our days
mm.
endlessly. And that
Oh
is what
yes,
happened during COVID, that people were, say, they were suffering so much. There was so much of difficulties that they found their escape, their source of strength in stories. And I
Mm,
think that is where its charm lies. That
mm.
that that it gives you that kind of purpose. It gives you that kind of hope that
Yes.
even though things are difficult today, they're going to be better tomorrow. So
Mm.
yes, it was a pretty roller coaster ride for us. I think I remember April, May in India, we had, so I think at the end of March, they had implemented the lockdown again.
Yes.
And we were all very hassled that how, because we had projects running simultaneously. We had around three manuscripts that were going on, and it was a bit of a setback for us. How will we do it?
Because it
But
came very suddenly also. Nobody was
exactly,
prepared for it.
I know, and I think that is. But then when a setbacks comes, it just makes you more stronger. And I think human beings are very very resilient in
Resilient.
that regard. They
Absolutely.
find their means. So we had our systems. We used to be on calls, and there used to be, so finally we made it. So what I'm
Mm.
trying to say is that yes, it is going to see a lot of trends. Sometimes it's going to be upward, sometimes it's going to be slightly downwards, but then it is never going to be static. It is never going to be a a pursuit that is not charming enough, because
Yeah.
it's human beings are hardwired to think in terms of
And there is
story.
a certain sense of satisfaction and gratification when you
Yes,
hold the book, this
yes,
that you have written. And my whole question was regarding that, the paperback book, the
yes,
charm of that book that we hold, the
yes,
pride that one feels that this is my story that I'm sharing with the world. And it's kind of, it's just kind of there forever. That
yes,
should not be lost. And this earlier I was having this conversation with my 16-year-old, and she asked me this really random question. She says, if you could go back or forward in time, whatever era, if you had the liberty to do that, where would you go? And I was like, oh, I would probably go to the Shakespeare era, and I would probably see the whole time then. And then she goes, what would people in future call our era? I said, she said, in terms of an author. And I was like, actually, yes. Are we? Do you think that we are losing that sense of, the beauty and the poetry in writing? That I almost told her, well, this will be the COVID era, I suppose. but
yes.
but but in terms of writing, are people so eager to share their story that it's become more and more and more simpler? The writing has become a lot simpler than being it more artistic, or are there less of the literary works that can be just, are they just there for generations? Do you think we will ever get another Shakespeare in these times?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. And coming from a 16-year-old, I'm already
Yes.
very impressed. I think there's a lot of reflection that's going on. So I'll tell you something very interesting. So, Shakespearean era, what exactly does it mean? That we actually had a writer who could speak in the language of the common people. So, if I know you must be aware that Shakespeare was not very elite in his writing. So
Yeah.
what he did was that he was able to tap into the human emotions and give it a voice that could actually be accessed by the masses. So since he was able to do it very well, we call that entire, say, phase the Shakespearean era. So I think what we need to always remember is that the art of actually tapping into the emotion does not belong to one person. So I'm sure if we had one Shakespeare back then, we will have many Shakespeare even now. In
Now.
fact, we do have. So that is something that I I learned when I actually entered into the publishing house, which were producing bestsellers. So producing bestseller mean your objective should be that anybody who picks the book should be able to connect with the story, should be able to resonate with the emotions expressed, and should not feel any block in terms of the literary expression. So that's
Hmm.
pretty much a very Shakespearean thinking in itself, if you
Yes.
look at it. Because as much as I love Amitav Ghosh and I am a big fan, I know that if I'll give an Amitav Ghosh to somebody who's living in Patna, that person may not be able to connect with
Appreciate
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it. Having said that, Chetan Bhagat is somebody whom I really look up to because he made writing very accessible. So,
Hmm.
what Shakespeare could do back then, artists and writers like Chetan Bhagat and even Ajay Pandey and Preeti Shenoy. Now, all of these writers, they may not write the most complex fiction that you can come across. They may not write in the most ornamental language, but then they are able to tell their story in a way that masses are able to understand.
So
So,
writing has become more and more simpler in terms of
simpler,
understanding the writing.
relatable, exactly,
Mm.
simpler,
Mm. It's what we
relatable,
speak, is what's
right.
written.
Exactly. I come from a literature background. So I have done 5 years of training in literary text. So I did it from Delhi University. I went to Hansraj first and then I came to Venki. And there I used to deal with Marlowe and Shakespeare and all these complicated literary geniuses. And while I appreciated what they said, I could never really connect with them because
Mm.
what the kind of language they used was very difficult to process, and also I think they were pretty foreign to me because I'm an Indian, and I think
Mm.
the cultural factor is also something that comes into play very critically. So I think that when I went to literature, when I studied those texts, I was dealing with the most complicated literary theories. And then I came to publishing, and then I had to unlearn everything that I did there.
That's interesting.
Yes. I think the first day my publisher told me that, Vinny, we are telling you very, say, outrightly, we are not working with literary geniuses here. We are working with very genuine people who have
Mm.
something meaningful to
But
say.
that just again shows that how easy you're making for people to express themselves just as they want to, just as they are, without decorating it with
Exactly.
any any impressive words. But again, because when we are speaking to our children here, when we do our creative writing courses with children, we focus so
Yes.
much on the vocabulary, saying that vocabulary kind of enhances what you're writing.
Yes.
And then but then you're right, when it comes to writing the story, the first draft always is very simple, and obviously because they're children and we are teaching them something
Yes.
new, we can kind of ask them to replace certain words. But
Exactly.
you're saying it's good to write simple but write effective.
Exactly. Write simple, write effectively. Always keep your target audience in mind. So
Hmm.
I think that is where your training and your diligence come into play. So what I'm trying to say is that you can be simple without being complicated. So you don't
Yes.
have to use the most, say, ornate words to communicate a simple story. Having said that, literary refinement is always welcome.
Yes.
So that is what will leave the impact. Now, how to maintain a balance between the two is practice and the art.
Yes,
So
and which
I
is where
think
probably you will come in place as an editor,
exactly
isn't it?
that is what you have to keep in mind. So just to try to answer your little one's question, I personally feel that the Shakespearean era, like in terms of the essence, has finally arrived. We are seeing a lot of Indian authors who are making a lot of difference. They are actually, so our era in general is the postmodern era, honestly, because that is how it is divided in terms of the literary periods. But if you want to, say, make it more specific, I believe in terms of writing, it's all the more contemporary now. It is all the more um, indigenous, if I can say
Mm,
that. It's it's us actually talking into the voice of the people who, so it's us talking to the common man. There's no hierarchy in place. It's more
mm.
egalitarian, and it is actually tapping into their voice to tell their stories better. So that is what my limited expression experience have taught me. that it's evolving. Having said that, it's evolving. Fiction literature is a very, very vast domain. So
Hmm.
you will have storytellers who are going to be very um, popular and very, say, common in terms. So they will actually speak to a common man and they will use their vocabulary. And you will have other set of authors as well who will
Hmm.
be more literary refined, who will actually use a more polished vocabulary. So what I'm saying is it's a very multicultural kind of a world.
But
I mean,
that's
there's many,
great. It's there is
yeah,
there is room for everyone. It just
exactly.
shows that.
There's room for everyone. It's
And
no bipolar or unipolar world anymore.
because
It's a
when
very
I'm
multipolar world.
reading a book, when I pick up a book to read, yes, I love to read something very simple. I don't know why. Is it? It's probably with time. My focus has moved more towards nonfiction and more of stories based on experience than fiction mostly. But I do love a mythological fiction as well. So when I'm reading something, yes, I do enjoy certain times that I'm reading something very beautifully written. Certain lines, certain words, certain expression just stays with you. And yes, that sometimes I just want a nice, easy read. So you're saying that there is a room for everyone, which is great to
Exactly.
know.
Exactly.
And also, talking about audiobooks, I mean, I there is a change in trend, and there is a surge in audiobooks. And I mean, literally, we have just partnered with a studio here, and we are now able to offer, the out of all these beautiful picture books that we have done for children, we are now turning all of them into audiobooks with some nice music and everything. Is that a trend that you're seeing in India as well?
Yeah, I think audiobooks in general have picked up pace. So yes, it is a very popular medium of expression. Even for the books that we have them in audiobooks also. In terms of sales, fortunately or unfortunately, they're not that profitable. That is
Mm,
the same question I had with my publisher a while back. That while there is this trend of audiobooks, so as a
mm,
medium of expression, yes, it's picking up pace. It's actually becoming more prominent. It's evolving in itself, but then it still needs to be accepted. It still needs to be more common in terms of the readers, because I think reading in itself is a very mental exercise. It's like
mm.
the very idea of holding a book in your hand and
It's
actually
again.
turning the pages
Oh yes,
and
I love my
very
physical copy of a book. Even though I have an ebook, I will always buy the book. I've absolutely
exactly.
loved it.
I think
It's
that
just making those
experience,
notes.
I know, I think even I love that. I am a very big time paperback fan. So I think that experience in itself is very, very distinct, and you cannot get that experience in an audiobook. So
Hmm.
in terms of experience, they're very different. In they're very different exercises.
But I think in terms of children's books, especially for
Yeah.
children, especially when they are already on their gadgets all the time,
Yes.
I suppose it's a good trend for that industry where they can just
Definitely.
listen to the music. They have we're talking about so like we just did a book of where the character was a little dog and then there was this girl, so you could actually hear the dog barking and everything. So I think that experience for children is good, but I do agree, for maybe for adults it's different. And
Yeah.
again, I know I'm taking a lot of your time, but it's just so interesting speaking to you. So, like we give children a chance to just turn their stories into a book.
Yeah.
And children as young as 8 or 9 year old, beautiful stories they've written. So, is that a trend again that you're seeing in India where young authors are getting a chance to actually express themselves? Because I had this theory at one point that a book written by a child will probably be read by a child with more enthusiasm. And we saw that, in our little get togethers or networking events or creative writing classes. We just place all the books that we have done for children and let
Yes.
children pick them up and read it. And they absolutely love the innocence, the way the story has been told. Do you think? Do you think that's a trend that will probably follow anytime? Or I know it might not be commercially viable,
Yes.
but is that a trend that you think it's where younger children will be given a chance to publish a book?
Definitely. So it's already happening, Ekta. So I'll
Okay.
tell you, there are, so we don't do it, honest. So we are not able to do it, but then there are publishing houses which are giving kids an opportunity to get published. So I know for the fact that Mithas Services, it's again a form of a publishing house. They are actually working with kids to get their stories published. So as a trend, it is already seeing itself in India. I mean,
Okay.
it's always a pleasure to actually see that children are taking so much of pain and they're actually giving in so much to their literary
Yes.
pursuit. So it's already happening, not that prominently as of now. Like it's like out of 10, you'll possibly see two or three books written by
Mm.
kids. So maybe it needs to be a little more prominent. It needs to be a little more structured in that regard, and
Mm.
and that would be brilliant because, as you rightly said, that children has the tendency to connect with stories that are written by other
Yes,
children.
and yes, and I certainly see that when they write a story and when they see the story turn into a book, it's almost giving them the confidence that whatever uniqueness that they hold within themselves, it's beautiful.
Yes.
Whatever thought that they have a thought, they have an idea, and there is this whole domain that they can expand into and actually create a book, and because we work with NGOs and everything, and children actually raise funds for social organizations through books. So it's kind of creating a little circle on its own, where a
Yes.
child is inspired to write a book, child publishes a book, raises money for a social organization, which in turn is helping another child
Yeah.
to actually read a book. So I find that whole process very much a part of their own. I think kind of instilling the positive values in a very experiential way. So for me, that's why books and storytelling is very very special in itself. So my another question to you, and probably the final question because I know we have extended this,
No
is
worries.
because people are very much in this misconception that once they write a book, they become millionaires. So, is it safe to say that if until you are an established writer, you've got to have writing as it should be something that should not it should not be that you just leave your job and you say, well, I'm going to be a full-time writer or an author right from day one. I'm just going to start earning millions. It's not that easy, is it?
Yes, I think I think it's a great question because writing in itself. So there's a difference between writing for passion and writing for
Yes.
actually earning your bread and butter. So I'll tell you what happens. I'll give you some very, very real examples. So there's this writer called Ajay Pandey, and he started off very, very. So he was a newcomer, and his first book, which is called "You Are the Best Wife." Now that was the first story that he wrote, and that actually picked up pace. That actually gave him that kind of identity that he was looking for. And after that, he started putting a lot of dedication to the literary pursuit in general. And then, of course, he published a lot of books um, simultaneously and one after the other. And what ended up happening was that he had created a loyal base for himself.
Hmm.
So recently, his book, "The Girl in the Red Lipstick," came, and I worked with him in that, and I could see how this entire cycle is that he when he publishes, and he has a set of readers who are actually eagerly waiting for him to
Oh.
get his story out, and we had the author signing in the office. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, it can happen, but it takes time. So
Hmm.
it is not an overnight success story.
Yes.
It takes time. It takes a lot of strategic decision making. It takes a lot of patience. I think patience is something that people just runs out of. So
Yes.
it can happen, but it will need its own pace.
Yes,
So
and
because
it's an individual journey that every
it
writer
is
probably
an
goes through
individual journey. It is
in
an
different
individual journey.
time. Some might find
Absolutely.
that evolvement in 6 months, and some will take years, and some might just take in a month or two. So it's
Yeah,
nothing that you can actually compare yourself with.
absolutely. Having said that, writing has become much more commercial now. I
Mm,
mean, it isn't something that people did not look up as a very solid career option. That's not the case anymore. People are
mm,
actually becoming full-time writers. They are actually
okay.
uh, earning their due. I mean, we I happen to be a part of the publishing houses which works with bestsellers. So
Yes.
I see that pattern, that trend in front of my eyes. That there are authors who are actually making a place for themselves, not just in terms of popularity, but also in terms of the financial gain bit of it. So it's
Mm,
happening in India because India has a very, very large base of audience.
yes,
I
and it's
think
growing. It's growing as
it's
well, isn't it?
growing by leaps and bounds. It's like, so you just have to identify your niche, your creative flair, and what is it that makes you different. And
Mm,
having said that, you have to actually also make an assessment of what works with the masses also. So
mm,
I think that is where strategic thinking will come. That if I'm writing to become famous, then I can possibly write a very literary ornate kind of a story. But then if I'm writing to make money, then I have to be a little more strategic. Then I have to
yeah.
really tap into the say the pulse of the audience. Then I have to
Mm.
interact with them. That is what Ajay does very well. So he has a very nice bond with his readers.
I
So
think that's another trend that is changing, that authors now have to have a very strong presence, and
absolutely
that fluid interaction that with the audience has to be there, and they have to be out there and talking about their books, talking about their
true.
journey, isn't it?
That is so. That's exactly one parameter that we have started keeping in mind. So when we evaluate a manuscript, we actually check the social media presence of the author, how
Okay.
active he is, what are the number of followers that he has. So writing in itself has become very commercial, and it needs that kind of resources. So you
Mm.
cannot just publish your book and forget about it. You have to
No,
really, really,
you have to become a brand, isn't it? Who's carrying that
exactly,
book with you? Oh,
absolutely.
absolutely.
You have to become a personal brand. You have to make that sell. So I have started seeing publishing as a blend of advertising
Yes.
and creative writing.
So
I
that's
think
another trend that we are seeing. It's not just
absolutely
writing anymore.
it
It's
is
it's also
not just writing anymore.
mm,
It's creative writing with a sprinkle of advertising.
everything. So as
Yes,
much. So there has to be a very strong focus on the personality itself.
absolutely. So that is what worked in favor of Chetan Bhagat. So if you actually see, if you maybe research about it more, 5 Point Someone was just not a good story. It was a good story that was very well branded also.
Yes.
So I think Chetan Bhagat was one of the pioneering authors who made writing very commercial. He actually
Mm.
spent his time, money, efforts, investment in actually selling his story.
And one of
So
my other favorite author is obviously Amish Tripathi.
yes, I think so. So
His
you
story is beautiful as well.
right, I think Anish Tripathi is a brilliant example of a literary genius and an advertising guru, as I
Yes.
would name him. So something that Devdutt that Patnaik does very well. So his stories are well written, but then they are even well marketed also. So
So
even
when you're talking about these young debut authors coming in, do you actually tell them all that yes, we are going to work with your story, yes, we are going to edit it, but then there's this that you have to do. You have to be out there. You have to be more present. Learn to how to tell your story. Is that something that you guide them throughout the
yes,
process?
we do that, and surprisingly, the realization is within them already. So I think all of us are so much entrenched into this age of social media that we know that if you won't sell it right, it's like it has to be in the sight of the audience for them to
Hmm.
notice. If you're not bringing it in their sight, you're losing the game already. So most of the time they have that realization on their own, and yes, we support them. We have to really work on the social media campaign. There is a book talk, there is the Instagram say creative. So I think there is a lot of jazz that happens in that domain as well, and that actually adds to both the sales and the personal branding of the author.
Mm,
So it's all very deeply connected to each other. Writing is not an isolated domain anymore. It cannot be, because if you want to reach to your readers, you'll have to build your way. You'll have to actually pave the bridge. You have to make the path, because
mm.
and I think the best part is that now all your authors are so much available. So
And they're so
I
much more
think
aware.
I know. I think
Yes.
the entire say bridge between the writer and the reader is so prominent now. I
No,
think
that's a very interesting point that you made, Vinny, because earlier on, people who were writers were just writers.
yes,
That was just their job to write. Now, it's almost like that book has become their gateway to expand into many more things,
that's correct. That's absolutely correct.
isn't
I
it?
think speaking on that now, one more thing that's happening a lot is that the books are turned into movies.
Yes.
So I think the AV rights, the audio visual rights, now that's another very interesting game altogether. So now when we are working with the authors, we also make it a point to see how easy it is to become into a movie. So I think
Interesting.
the audio visual and the publishing, the writing and the say film and the television industry, so I think they are also getting connected more and more. In
Because
fact,
we have more OTT platforms as well.
exactly. So I think in itself, digital media has touched the publishing industry so much that it has evolved for the better. It's actually
Oh.
coming up with newer modes of storytelling, and it's constantly reinventing itself also. And that's true for any industry to last. That's true for any individual to remain relevant. So I see
Mm,
it as a positive change. I have never really liked writers who think that they can just isolate themselves and write something which has absolutely no bearing on the society. I don't think those are the kind of writers that people remember. I think the
mm,
kind of writers that are remembered in the long run are the ones who actually made it a point to connect with their readers, to actually
mm,
help them tell their stories in the most effective way. So
mm.
that's what
Yes.
I think, and that's what I
Yes.
see it happening more and more.
Yeah, because that personally, that's what I saw. When my book came, The Voice of Kali, it just became the portal for me to actually get invited in so many places to just talk about empowerment. And and
Yes,
and and not that I was not speaking earlier, but then just kind of accelerated that process as a speaker, which
yes.
is where I thought, well, actually, it was a book, but that's expanded into something more. And from there on comes my last question to you, which is, coming to London and seeing the publishing industry here,
Yes,
especially for Indian writers, and writers of diverse background. It's not easy. It's not easy to get your
yes,
books published on a commercial with the traditional publishers. So most of the people will look back at their roots in India and see if they can actually get something published there.
yes.
And so, uh, do you accept those kind of submissions from people who are living here, Indians who are living here, non-Indians, Indians who are living here, who have a story to tell, and they want probably say, well, at least I have that India to start my publishing journey with. Is that something you accept?
My answer is yes, yes, and a big yes. So I think in this in this financial year itself, so we did a book called Kathai. It's an illustrated book for children which has mythological stories in it. Very beautiful illustrations made in Madhubani style. All some great mythological stories with a very contemporary twist to it. So the writers consciously made it a point to introduce a lesson that is very
Wow.
applicable for children in their daily lives. and those writers are not based in India. So we connect
Ah.
with them abroad. I think this time we have a lot of writers who are based outside India. So we have people connecting with us from US, then with Dubai, I think different places. So
Hmm.
it's always a pleasure to actually help them tell their story, because as you only enlightened me that it becomes very difficult.
Yes, because I know the moment we opened our gates for to publish the books, and there were so many queries because I was, like I said, I personally went through that journey with my own book, and I was like, why is there no place to publish?
Yes,
Why are people not accepting? Obviously, may have changed, but then I saw that there's such a surge in the South Asian market here
yes.
living outside India who want to share a story, but they are not getting the gates. So I'm so glad that that accessibility is there.
Yes,
And
yes.
I will just ask you to just give probably writers some few tips in there because you're an editor. Just maybe 3 or 4 tips into writing if they are thinking of publishing a book.
I think the first tip that I will actually give is a more philosophical one. So if you've decided to write, just go all the way. I mean, don't leave it in the middle, because what we generally notice is that there is this spike of energy and then it starts dwindling.
Just done.
So I think go all the way, believe in your story, be authentic. So I think that is something that we are not told enough, that a good story, there's a difference between a good story and a well written story. So I think if you have a good story, it can be made more presentable. So believe in your story, go all the way, train yourself. I think writing in itself is an art, and it has some rules and regulations that are associated with it. So take that pain to actually hone your craft. Practice, practice, practice. I think don't expect that today you have an idea, so you're just going to complete the novel in one go. You will have so many drafts. So don't just
Yes,
get
yes.
bogged down by the drafting stage. Seek help. I think this is also something that we are not told enough. Feedbacks always help.
Mm,
So writing is not as isolated as you may think. It is a very, very collaborative process. Once you write your draft, show it to your friends, show it to people, to editors, take their inputs. So I think that is how you will even get ideas. Also, a lot of times we get writers who tell us that they are facing a creative block, and the simple advice that we give them is just take your story out. There is this
mm,
fear of being judged. I think I
yes,
personally feel that writing in itself is a very, very courageous pursuit, because you're just bearing your soul and actually taking it out in the open, and people are going to be all judgmental. So I think you need to just strip off all your
just have a lot of
anxieties,
faith in yourself
have a lot of faith in
because
yourself.
this is your story, isn't it? It's your
Exactly.
your baby, and you can't be scared about it.
Absolutely. And once you're done with your story, do your research, do
Mm,
research, look at different publishing houses, look at what they are looking for, invest your time in writing your proposal. I think sometimes people are so invested in their manuscript that they don't give due diligence to the proposal and to the cover letter. These are the
mm,
things that actually matter in the long run. Always remember your target audience. So when you're writing a cover letter, you're addressing the editor, so you have to just imagine an editor looking at 100 proposals. How is yours different? So I think
mm.
simple advice,
And
just
don't CC.
please. I think very, very simple advice. Always, whenever you're addressing someone, just double check the spelling of the person. Sometimes I get mails like, "Dear sir, how are you?" So I think, I mean, these are the things that happens because people don't pay enough attention to it.
Attention to it.
So I think little things go a long way. Most importantly, when you have started something, finish your journey. I think that is what I see a lot. People tend to get stuck in the middle. You will have to just power through your way and believe in your story. Reach out to people who might help. And if anybody is interested in knowing more about us, we have a very, very open editorial email ID. It's called editorial at shrishtipublishers.com. The mails does not go to spam. It directly comes to us. We
So
actually
you
read it.
actually answer the question asked by aspiring writers.
Yes, yes. I think if you have
Beautiful.
any, yeah, I think it's a very, that is a part of a job, honestly. So it's like, if
Mm.
you have questions, if you want to get published, you have to just email it to us. I can definitely say for us, because we actually look at all the proposals and everything. So I think these are just little advices that I will give. One last advice: read a lot. I think writers have this. If you're a writer, you'll have to read a lot, read different kinds of writings. Don't just stick to the books that you like, and that is how you will grow. So it's just reading,
Yeah.
writing, and rewriting. I
You
think
know what,
that's the cycle that
Vinny,
I
I think I will have to organize another podcast with you because you have
oh,
so much to share, and I'm enjoying this so much. And there are so many more questions that are coming in my mind as I speak to you that
yes,
we might just have to do another one, a part two of
definitely,
leading from here, something that
definitely, definitely.
we can again arrange. But I really, from bottom of my heart, want to thank Srishti Publishers for actually being one of those publishers who's genuinely committed to giving um, authors a platform to express themselves, and you're actually answering their questions. You're actually bringing the right talent out, and also nurturing that talent to an extent that you're even willing to invest in their language skills and more into the personality development as well. So really, really appreciate that. You kind of, like I said, restored my faith in the industry again. And I
Thank you
really want to
so much.
thank you for this time that you have given me today. And I'm sure many of those who are looking for any insight in publishing, they will find more. And like I said, I promise we'll come back with more with Vinny because there is so much that she has to share, and there is so much more that I want to discuss with her.
Thank you so much, Ekta. I think it has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I was so nervous before
No, no,
joining in. I was like, but then you just made it so easy and so comfortable for me. It's a great platform for anybody who wishes to connect with me. I think I'll just share my email ID with Ekta. I am
Sure.
always eager to meet writers, to actually help them with their manuscripts. If there's any insight that you think would be helpful for you, feel free to write to me. And I'm very sure all of us are storytellers, and we just want to build a better world
Yeah.
through our stories. So
Yes.
just keep that faith alive within you, and I think the sky is the limit. That's what
Thank
I
you
believe.
so much, Vinny, for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.